Hey everybody, it's been a busy month. I haven't had a chance to shoot much video, but something interesting happened this past week or so. I was on Facebook, and in our neighborhood, somebody posted that they were looking for a bike shop to tune up their bike because they hadn't ridden in a while. And so I recommended the local bike shop that I usually go to, but through the dialogue with this person, I kind of realized that they were actually looking for somebody kind of local to maybe work on their bike a little bit. And at first I was hesitant to volunteer, but then I realized, I actually kind of like working on bikes, and this would be a good opportunity to shoot a video about how to get your bike back on the road after it's been sitting on the, trainer or on the garage wall for a couple of years. So I'm going to go through the things that I did to get this bike back on the road and show you the process of everything I did. All right, so the first step is you want to wash your bike. If it's been in the garage or on a trainer, it's probably dusty, dirty. You have some spider webs on it, so you want to give it a good wash. And what that's going to allow you to do is do a good visual inspection. And you want to look at all the cables, look for any kind of rust, or especially on a carbon frame, you want to look for dents, stings, cracks, anything that could suggest that there's a problem with the bike, especially if it's been in a garage or people are bumping things into it, that kind of thing. The next thing is clean and lube the chain. This is just something that you're going to want to do, especially for a bike that's been stored for a long time. Take the chain off, clean it really good, give it a lube, and then you should be good to go. If your bike has been stored on the garage wall for a long time, replace the tubes and the tires. Tubes for sure, tires if necessary, because just being exposed to ozone and high temperatures, they're going to degrade and eventually they'll fail. And the last thing you want is to take your bike out after not riding for a long time, go out for a ride, get a flat. You also want to adjust your derailleur. Usually this isn't required. If the bike was running okay before, maybe just a tension adjustment, because cables do stretch and housings do compress, so you might want to crank up on the cable tension a little bit. But it's a good idea to check this, because bikes sometimes leave bike shops or mechanics with surprisingly bad adjustments, so it's not a bad idea to take a look and see where it's set and just make sure that it's in a good place. Replace all the batteries. If you've got sensors or lights, anything that takes a battery, replace the batteries. Usually it's coin cells or AA's. Just go through and switch all those out. Also, along those lines, refresh your saddlebag. If you keep a patch kit and CO2 and those kind of things in a saddlebag under the saddle, take that off, dump it out, take a look at everything. Make sure the tube that's in there is still good, because if it's the same age as the tubes on the bike, maybe time to replace it. Again, you don't want to go out on the road after not riding for a long time, get a flat, and then not be able to fix it because the tube in your saddlebag is no better than the tube that was in your tire. Also, check your brakes and adjust those. Again, if they were good before, they're probably fine now, but you never know. I've seen a lot of bikes leave bike shops with the brakes adjusted very strangely, so not a bad idea to check that and tune those up a little bit. And then the final thing is the headset. The headset's an easy thing to check. Just lock the front brake, rock the bike back and forth, and if you feel any sort of thumping or movement, and if you have any doubt, it's probably loose. If it's snug where it should be, you won't feel any kind of movement or thumping or anything. So what you want to do there is basically undo the stem clamp bolts, tighten down the adjuster bolt a little bit, and then retighten the stem bolts. And I'm not going to go into detail on how to do all these various steps, because there are videos on YouTube that show you how to do this stuff in detail. I'd say check out Park Tool, and if I'm industrious, I'll put some links up in the overhead here, like the card thing, to some good videos on how to do each of these things in detail. But the rest of this video basically just shows you, how I cleaned this bike up and got it ready to go again. And there's a couple things that in the video that's coming up that I don't list in the list here that are just nice to haves. But anyway, let's take a look at this bike and get going on it. So I apologize for the noise. They're doing construction next door, so there's a lot of hammering. But just want to show you, this bike's been on a trainer for a while, so you can see there's a lot of dust on everything. It's just been indoors collecting dust. And so before I work on this, I just want to clean it up, get all the dust off of it. I've already removed the pump, and there was a light on the handlebars. I removed that, but I need to remove this saddlebag so I don't get that all wet. I've got my bike washing supplies out here in a bucket, and the hose is set up. So just gonna give this bike a wash, and then we can do some work, get it tuned up. Alright, so to wash the bike, I set it up on one of my Feedback Sports rack workstands, just so I could shoot some video. Usually I just rest the bike against the garage door. But you can see I wet the bike down, kind of do an overall cleaning, and then I like to do details like, in a second here you'll see me take a brush and spin the cassette backwards, and that cleans the cassette and the chain. And there we go, cleaning the cassette and the chain there, and then I'll shift into the other end of the cassette, and then do the same thing again. And that gets the chain and the cassette kind of clean before I actually soak the chain in some solvent. I'm washing the tires, which is kind of funny because the tires are the first thing to get dirty, but they also, if you don't wash the tires when you wash the bike never really looks totally clean. But if you do wash them, the bike looks brand new. So I rinse it off, and then when I go to dry the bike, you'll see I give it a couple of taps on the ground. Like I kind of thump it vertically, and then I'll stand it up, and that gets water out of the frame and kind of shakes everything loose. Put it out in the sun to dry, and I figured since my stuff was set up, I might as well wash my bike as well. So I washed my Niner, even though it really wasn't that dirty. It's just nice to have a nice clean bike. And this went a lot faster because there wasn't as much dust and grime on my bike. Again, just washing the wheels and tires. Getting in there washing the hubs. And then rinse it off. Get it dry with a towel here in a second. Yeah, dried it off. And then I cleaned her saddlebag too. The person whose bike I was cleaning, I cleaned the saddlebag. I basically just wiped it down with a wet towel, and that got it back to looking pretty new. I just let the bikes dry in the sun for a little bit, cleaned up my tools, and then brought everything back inside. Alright, so as you can see, I got the bike up on the stand, and it is greatly cleaned up. Show you some close-ups here. Got all that dust and grime off the bike. And it's in a lot better shape now. At this point, working on it is actually going to be pretty nice. Before, it was kind of gross and just wasn't really going to be a lot of fun to take apart. But now that it's had a good bath, no problem. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to pull the rear wheel off this bike. And by the way, I'm just going to go to time lapse for a lot of this work so you don't have to watch me do this stuff in real time. Alright, so I get the rear wheel off the bike, and then I had to find the master link on the chain. It turns out there wasn't a master link. It was pinned, so I found a location other than the pin, split the chain, took it off, and then did a lot of detail cleaning on the bike. And what I'm using is a shop rag with some Goo Gone on it, and that's great for cutting through any grease or grime that's on the frame and just getting it really clean. And I just kind of do like a flossing motion around any of the bosses or axles or any place that's hard to get to, and just clean all that grime out of there. And it also is great for getting chain lube off the chain rings, the teeth of the chain rings, and around the pedal axles, around the bottle cages, and just really detail the bike. And around the headset there, seat tube. So this is an interesting thing that I've noticed on this bike. There are these little pieces of tape that come on brand new brake calipers that basically protect the caliper when it's open. Before it's installed on the bike, before there's any cable tension, the caliper springs fully open, and this part of the caliper comes over and touches this caliper arm here. And those pieces of tape, if you're meticulous about how you build a bike, you pull those pieces of tape off. But this bike has the pieces of tape still in place at both the front and the rear. So whoever built this bike obviously did not pull those off there. Okay, so I used that rag with the Goo Gone on it, trying to get that tape residue off the calipers, and I was sort of successful, but it was kind of baked on there after those years. I did replace the tires. It had 23mm tires on it, and I took a set of 25mm tires from my inventory and put those on the bike. And I also replaced the valve cores in the set of tubes that I had because they were starting to get kind of gummed up with some sealant. So replaced those, reinflated, and when I reinflate, I like to spin the tire and look at the bead and make sure it's even all the way around. It's a good way to make sure that the bead is seated correctly. And then put the wheel back on the bike. And the next thing I did is took a look at the rear derailleur adjustments, basically the limit screws. So you can see on the high gear position, it was a little bit over where it should be. On the low gear position, it was more okay. It's a little hard to see here, but it lined up a little better. So then I basically went through and adjusted the limit screws for the high and low position until I had the derailleur, so it wouldn't over travel on either end. And there's a trick to doing this. If you're going to the low position, you can put tension on the cable like I'm doing there and scoot the derailleur all the way into the low gear. Makes sense because the derailleur should over travel a little bit to get into that low gear. Next thing I did is adjust the brakes. And what you want to do is make sure the brake is on the brake track and not above or below. If it's too high, it'll get into the tire and cut the tire. If it's too low, you risk it getting onto the painted part of the rim or the anodized part of the rim, or worse, going into the spokes. And when I got this bike, it had plastic reflectors on it, and they were kind of crumbling because they were old. So I took the plastic reflectors off, and I got some of this reflective tape. This is a 3M product, I think, but it's just something I have around. And so I cut little pieces of it in blue and gray, and then I replaced the factory reflectors, and I also put some on the back of the pedals. And I don't know if you've ever seen a bicycle at night, but that oscillating up and down motion of the pedals is really distinctive, and it's a good safety feature. And you can see I put some blue tape on the rims as well to replace the plastic spoke reflectors. And here in this picture you can kind of see how reflective that is. And then there's the chain back out of the wax, still stiff from the wax. But I basically put that on the bike with a new master link, and then that's basically it. So there you have it. That's pretty much everything you need to do to get your bike back on the road after it's been sitting idle for a long time. And I think everybody's been in that situation because all it takes is an injury. You get a long-term injury, or you get busy at work, or you move, or the seasons change and you stop riding for a while and you think, oh, I'll get back to it. And next thing you know, 5 years have gone by. So it does happen. And I just want to say that it's not insurmountable. It's easy to get your bike down, get it tuned up, and get back out there. So hopefully with the help of this video, you can do that and get back to riding. So I'll see you out there on the road. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and also please subscribe to my channel. Take care. Have a good day.